Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. This is the postgame podcast. The Timberwolves defeated the OKC Thunder by 10 on Sunday, improving to 2-1 on the season. Anthony Edwards had 30. Karl-Anthony Towns played a really well all-around game, and it was really the Timberwolves bench in the fourth quarter that extended the lead from 8 to 20 plus. We'll talk about the main takeaways surrounding the rotation, the fourth quarter bench performance, but also quite a bit of Ant talk today here on the postgame podcast. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. Happy Monday, everybody. Happy start to your week. And it's a victory Monday. The Timberwolves beat the OKC Thunder on Sunday by 10 and improved to 2-1 on the season. A packed show for you today. Key takeaway, some additional takeaways, and also individual studs and duds, as we always do on the postgame podcast. First of all, a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, you can find this show free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio podcasts or audio platforms, I should say. It also includes now the brand new Locked On Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. So all your Locked On Minnesota sports shows you can find on this app on Roku or Amazon Fire TV. More great local sports coverage 24/7. It's absolutely free. Download the Locked On Sports Minnesota app today on Roku or Amazon Fire TV. You can also, of course, follow the show on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and my account, which is at Beecken, and that's with two B's, two E's, CKEN. All right, let's get into the main takeaway here. This was a game that the Wolves led pretty much throughout. They actually led by as many as 18 in the first quarter, 13 at the end of the first quarter. They were only up, I think it was 9 at halftime, and then 8 headed into the fourth quarter. The third quarter was not too dissimilar from the third quarters of the first two games this season. Of course, the win against the Thunder last Wednesday, and then the disappointing overtime loss to the Jazz on Friday. It was a little bit less sleepy of a third quarter for the Wolves, but the Thunder did pull to within 1 point after trailing by as many as 18. The Wolves got it back to 8 by the end of the third. And then to start the fourth, it was a really unique lineup that the Timberwolves, and this is the key takeaway. The Wolves trotted out to start the fourth quarter of an 8-point game that had been down to 1. Things were a bit touch and go. And the lineup is Jordan McLaughlin, Jalen Noel, Anthony Edwards at the 3, Taurean Prince at the 4, and Naz Reid at the 5. Naz had not played all night. He did not play at all in the first 3 quarters. He didn't play in the first game against the Thunder and played sparingly on Friday against the Jazz, and that was entirely due to foul trouble. Now, in this game, both Rudy and Cat kind of flirted with foul trouble, but neither was really in foul trouble. And there were some issues in the third quarter in general, mostly with the lack of urgency, similar to what we'd seen in the previous 2 games, maybe not quite as terrible. But Finch just decided to push the Naz Reid button and push the bench button, Ant plus the bench, to start the fourth. And what was really kind of a very small lineup. And I don't want to read too much into this, and who knows, critics, I'm building a straw man now, but critics may say like, hey, the Wolves actually played better when they went small. Too bad they invested so much in having such a gigantic lineup. Well, I mean, this is one game. It's one instance. It's a game where actually Rudy and Cat both played pretty well. It was just kind of a confluence of things that allowed the Thunder to hang around. We'll get into that later. One of my additional takeaways next segment, I'll talk about why this game wasn't really as close as it felt like it was. But at any rate, this McLaughlin, Noel, Edwards, Prince, Reid lineup was fantastic. This was an 8-point game when the fourth quarter started. By the 6-minute mark, the first time that Finch made a sub, it was a 20-point game. So they were a plus 12 in 6 minutes. Bryn Forbes came in for Noel at that point. For about a minute and a half, Noel took a rest. Then he came in for Ant with just under 5 minutes to play in an 18-point game, and that was it. Now, it did get down to 10. That was some sloppy, final 90 seconds from Wendell Moore and Bryn Forbes and some of the deep bench guys. But This was a bench-led kind of extension of the lead, and you go and you look at the box score. Rudy Gobert only had to play 25 minutes in this game. Cat only had to play 30. That's really big on the front half of a back-to-back with the Wolves playing now tomorrow night or Monday night tonight. That's big to be able to get those guys, allow them to play 30 or less minutes. They've got to travel back to Minnesota to play the Spurs on Monday night. Ant had to play 34 minutes. Cat played 30. Gobert played 25. Nobody else played more than 27 on the roster. Jaden McDaniels played 27. D'Angelo Russell played 26. And nobody on the bench played more than 24. So this is a well-balanced out kind of slate of minutes for Chris Finch in this game. And that bench unit was a ton of fun. I mean, they really kind of out-thundered the Thunder in some ways. The Thunder, a lot of the reason they were hanging around in terms of what OKC did was kind of the hustle plays. It was getting on the floor for loose balls. It was being competitive on the offensive glass. It was, some of those kind of on the edges things. And that's what this unit did. And both Noel and Edwards, and really also Naz Reid, actually did a really great job passing the ball. The unit was great with passing, with being cohesive, and clearly the McLaughlin, Noel, Naz Reid trio, their time together in Iowa, that meant that means something here. Those guys played, a decent chunk of games, a couple dozen games together, at least down in Iowa over the past few years. And there's a cohesion between that trio, and you add in a vet like Taurean Prince, and just a really dynamic player. We'll talk more about him next segment because of the 30 he put up. But Anthony Edwards, add that to the group, and that's a really well-rounded, group of guys. Rebounding would be the primary weakness, right? Rebounding, you could say perimeter defense, because McLaughlin's a decent defender, but small. Noel's improving, but not a great defender yet. You're relying on Ant and Prince to do a lot defensively. Naz has some holes defensively too, but your main issue is rebounding. Naz Reid's a below average rebounder for a 5. Prince is a bad rebounder for a 4. Ant's a bad rebounder, frankly, period. And so is Noel. Like, actually, Noel's okay for his size, but you're talking about a relatively small and poor rebounding lineup. But it didn't matter. The Wolves needed a shot in the arm, and this was an energetic lineup that was versatile offensively, switchable enough on defense, and had a ton of punch. These are all guys who can get their own shot if they need to. And that's exactly what happened in this fourth quarter. But it wasn't just that. It wasn't just ISO ball. It was, like I said a minute ago, it was really that ball movement that each of these guys was able to kind of encourage at different times. Ant primarily ran the offense, but McLaughlin had his moments. Noel had his moments. Like I said, even Naz Reid had his moments passing the ball. Consistent ball movement. Offensive rebounding was surprisingly good from that group. I mean, that was the difference in this game. It allowed the Wolves to go from an 8-point lead to a 20-point lead. It allowed Rudy to only have to play 25 minutes, Cat to only have to play 30 minutes, D'Lo only played 26, Jaden McDaniels played 27, and the Wolves should have a fairly well-rested squad, as much as you can be on a road home back-to-back, and still playing, 20-some minutes. But there's a big difference between that and playing, 38 minutes and, it coming down to the wire and everything that comes with that, and then turning around and playing 24 hours later. But the Wolves should have a relatively well-rested group to take on the Spurs on Monday. I have a couple more takeaways. Yes, we'll talk Ant. We'll talk a little bit of Cat. I thought the early part of the game was pretty interesting with what the Wolves did with Towns. So we'll get to all that here next before we do individual studs and duds. First, though, let's talk about the title sponsors of today's show, and that is, of course, our friends over at Prize Picks. If you had taken the Anthony Edwards over on points, I don't know exactly what it was at Prize Picks, but I'm pretty sure you would have been just fine if you took the over there. Probably Rudy Gobert rebounds, even though he had a 20-plus rebound game the other night. I think 23 boards on Friday. He had 15 again on Sunday night. Prize Picks is fantastic. You just take the over-under on really any category. Points, it's even as granular as like three-pointers made, steals. It's not just the big categories. It's also a cross-sport option. You could take the over-under at Prize Picks on, Sunday. You could have done basketball and football. You could have gone the Sunday night football game. Maybe you wanted to take Jalen Waddle over on receiving yards with the Dolphins, and Karl-Anthony Towns over on points or over on three-pointers made. You could do that. You pick 2 to 5 players, any sport. And if they score more or less than, and if they'll score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. You're not competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. And you can do it again with any sport and cross-match sports. NBA and NFL is a ton of fun right now. baseball playoffs, headed to the World Series here soon, the start of NHL. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's really easy, safe and fast withdrawals. And you can download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users, as I said off the top of the show, can get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks gives you $100. If you deposit 50, PrizePicks gives you $50. Don't forget to enter the promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. A big thank you once again for making Locked On Wolves your first listen today. Now make your second listen the Game to Game NBA podcast. Every moment, every top performance, and every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Okay, additional takeaways from this one. Let's talk about Anthony Edwards' 30. This was a great Ant game. And we talked about pretty extensively on this show. He had a rough preseason by and large across 5 games, an extremely rough opening night, and he wasn't much better on Friday in the loss to Utah. He's had some moments, of course. The Euro step has been very prominent. By the way, if you watch the Oklahoma City broadcast, they seemed annoyed by how many Euro steps Anthony Edwards was performing, but I think they were also just annoyed with the 30 points on 19 shots. They didn't like that very much either. But the Euro steps have been great. Finishing with the left hand, finishing at the rim in general. Again, rough patches in the first 2 games, but I feel like that's been a little bit better. It's really been the shot selection the first couple of games. All of that was pretty good in this game. The only issues were there were, I think, maybe 2 offensive fouls that he committed, and a couple others that were close. There was a travel at one point where he took 3 steps out of a Euro step, and it was close, but that third step was a travel. So turnovers are really the only complaint here with this performance from Ant. 30 points on 13 of 19, 3 of 7 outside the arc. Most of those 7 shots were pretty good in the flow of the offense. It's a shot he can make. 1 of 3 at the line. Obviously, like that to be a little better, but 30 and 11 rebounds, 3 assists, and a steal in this game. And just kind of a well-rounded performance from Ant. I thought the decision-making was good. As I said, I thought the decision-making, not just on shooting the ball, but the decisions on passing the ball were smart too. There were a couple where you could kind of see the gears turning. Like typically this is an Ant pull-up with a hand in his face, but instead it was like a pause and then a swing to the corner or whatever the situation was. Ant really kind of slowed down a little bit in this one. You knew that there was nobody on the Thunder with no Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. There really wasn't anyone on the Thunder that could slow him down one-on-one. Lu Dort gave it his best go, but it did not go well for him. By the way, I don't like individual game plus minus or individual player plus minus for games, but this is actually really funny. Lu Dort was a minus 29 in this game. He played 30 minutes. The Thunder only lost by 10. Dort was a minus 29. It's because he guarded Ant for most of the game. Ant was a plus 22 in 34 minutes and scored 30 points on 19 shots. So that'll do it to your individual plus minus for a single game. So poor Lu Dort, but Anthony Edwards had his way today or on Sunday. He was just fantastic. Again, decision-making, shot selection, all of it was good. The Euro step was on point. He just kind of glided to the basket. He tried to power to the basket a couple of times. He got hit with those offensive fouls, but the dexterity around the rim was top-notch from Ant in this one. My second thing is Karl-Anthony Towns passing. And we saw this, I think game 1 was, if I remember correctly, a little better than game 2 this season. But especially early in the game, the Wolves were getting Cat the ball more in post-up situations. He ended up only attempting 9 shots in 30 minutes, which was actually the same mark as Rudy. So both Gobert and Towns each attempted 9 shots. Cat only tried 9 shots, only had 3 3-point attempts, finished with 8 rebounds, 5 assists. He did have 3 turnovers. I believe 2 of them, for sure, at least one of them was an offensive foul. But I mean, this was like a quiet but good Cat game. A low usage, low minute, 30-minute performance from Cat. 15 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists. If he plays a few more minutes, it's probably a double-double with 6 or 7 assists. So I wonder how much of this we'll see if at some point, it's going to depend on how teams are playing the Wolves. But the Wolves made a concerted effort to get Cat the ball in post-up type situations early in the game. Some were mid-post. He actually got him a couple of low post touches as well. And the Thunder were trapping hard. They were trying to double the post. And Cat had only like one possession where it felt like maybe he turned it over, and then he didn't. He actually made a couple of really smart decisions passing out of the double. There was one particular play, and I jotted down a note. He had the double come from under the basket from the baseline side. And like, I believe the Thunder were fronting him. He got the ball, the double came, and he's gotten caught before, like trying to flip a pass behind himself under the basket. And the opposing team, what they'll do is the player guarding, the offensive player in the corner will sag down and essentially, guard the man of the guy coming to double Cat. And he anticipated that, didn't pass it to, I forget who was there. I think it was Rudy. And instead hit Jaden McDaniels, who was cutting from the perimeter, who basically backfilled behind the defender that had gone to guard Rudy underneath the basket. So it was perfect patience from Towns, a very good delivery on the pass. I believe McDaniels made the shot from inside the paint. Just a really well executed play. And in past years, and even sometimes this year, I think we've seen this, Cat will just kind of like anticipate, okay, the double's coming, I'll swing it to that guy. But you have to think kind of the next pass ahead, right? You have to say, okay, where's the doubler coming from? Then where's his help coming from to help the helper, right? Then you pass it to that guy or the guy who's then cutting into the paint from the opposite wing. And that's exactly what Cat did. And it was just a dynamic pass, really, really kind of next level. I thought that was really impressive. And so that was the type of game. We did see one of those kind of flip behind the head. The double comes. He gets it to Rudy for a dunk and an and one. We saw that. I think it was third quarter, maybe four. Yeah, it would have been third quarter to kind of help stem the tide after a mini Thunder run. But those types of plays with Cat, so far he seems to be content with that. He likes passing the ball. He's always fancied himself a good passer. He wants to be considered a really good passing big man. And as long as he's happy with some games only getting 8, 9, 10, 11 shot attempts and only, 3 or 4 threes up, if he's content with it and if the Wolves are winning, great. He is a good passer. He just needs to make the right decisions. He's a very, very talented offensive player all the way around. It's just making those right calls in those split second decisions. And sometimes he hasn't always done that in past years. And I thought he did a really good job of that in this particular game. My last takeaway here is, I alluded to this off the top of the show. This game really wasn't, it got up to 20. I know the final margin was 10. And if you listen to, the Thunder post game, which I did, they talked about how this game was a lot closer than 10 points. If the Wolves just make open threes, and I get that's a pretty big if, but I guess what I mean by that is the rest of the execution was pretty good. The defense wasn't horrible. There were certainly lapses. There were issues in the third quarter. The offensive execution had lapses too. This is game 3. Every NBA game, you could say there's lapses. No game is perfect for really any team. But by and large, this is a pretty solid all-around performance. They just missed open threes. Timberwolves only had 4 made three-pointers headed into the fourth quarter of this game. They made 6 in the third quarter. They had 4 made threes. They still only shot 29% from 3 for the game. And a ton of these were open looks that they just missed. If they just, make 3 of those, then going into the third quarter, it's not a 9 or 8 point game at halftime. It would have been like a 15-point game at halftime. Just make open threes, and this is a much easier win. And over the course of the season, we're going to see them do that. Remember last year individually, Taurean Prince was like 25%, 20%, something like that at Christmas time on threes, and he was great the second half of the season. If the Wolves as a team can just avoid going cold for entire games like this, and you're going to have games where you do, but if they could just shoot a reasonable percentage, these are the types of games that they should win by 15 to 20, and it shouldn't be a question of whether or not they could rest their starters in the fourth quarter. Just make your open threes over the course of the season. They're going to. It's going to even out. This is a good 3-point shooting team. Everyone in the lineup except for Rudy Gobert and I guess maybe McLaughlin should be a league average or better 3-point shooter. Maybe Jaden McDaniels, right? They don't really have anyone except for Rudy that's a complete non-shooter in this rotation. Over the course of the season, they're going to be a good 3-point shooting team from deep. It just didn't happen in this game, and it would have been a lot less close had they shot a little bit better from 3. I didn't note this off the top. Kyle Anderson obviously didn't play. He had the back spasms the other night and only played a minute, so he wasn't available, didn't play. And for the Thunder, Josh Giddey left with a sprained ankle. He only played 22 minutes, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander sat out as this was the second night of a back-to-back for OKC. So big to win on the first night of a back-to-back for Minnesota. That matchup with the Spurs is Monday night. We're not going to preview that matchup on this show today. Just know that the Spurs, they got somewhat of an unexpected big win over Philadelphia on Saturday and have actually, I believe they won on Friday too against the Pacers. They've had a pretty frisky start to the season. So the Wolves traveling on a back-to-back, it's far from a sure thing. But we'll, of course, cover that game following the game on Monday. I'm not going to do a pre-show or a preview for that. But let's finish the show today with individual studs and duds. We'll do that here next. BetOnline.net is your number one source for betting, football, and the start of the new basketball season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every single game at betonline.net. Football betting wise, I think I did okay on Sunday. This is a fun time of year. Obviously, the start of the NBA, baseball World Series is coming up. So the best playoff baseball is obviously the best baseball. And the middle of football season, both college and professional football, you get the start of NHL. All kinds of things are happening in the sports world. So be sure to check out betonline.net. As always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, let's talk individual studs and duds from the Wolves win over the Thunder. Of course, the number one stud for Minnesota is Anthony Edwards. 30 points, 11 rebounds, 3 assists and a steal in this game. Shot 13 of 19. Phenomenal from the field. He was 10 of 12 on 2-point attempts and 3 of 7 outside the arc. Just 1 of 3 at the line. You'd like to see him get there more often. I actually thought this game was officiated okay, except for some of the touchy offensive fouls on the Wolves in the first half. It's like the refs just couldn't stop calling them for a little while. But in general, this was officiated okay. I didn't feel like Ant really needed or should have necessarily gotten that many more free throw attempts. By the way, the Wolves did not shoot the ball at the line, 14 of 22, 64%, under 64% from the line for Minnesota. Ant did have 5 turnovers. He was fine defensively as well. Not that the Thunder had too many perimeter players that were really a threat in this game, especially once Giddey went out with the injury. Terrence Mann was 0 of 6 shooting threes, and Lou Dort was just kind of fine. Or it's not Terrence Mann, I'm sorry, Trey Mann. Wolves just played the Clippers a few days ago. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, good game overall from Ant. And anytime he can drop a double-double, the Wolves will take that. He doesn't have too many double-digit rebounding games, so fantastic. Rudy Gobert is also a stud for this one, 15 and 15. Haven't really talked about him much, but he was good. 7 of 9 shooting. Similar, to his performance in the first game of the season against OKC, was just kind of available around the rim, just much bigger, much bigger than anybody on the Thunder roster. Some easy buckets, a couple and one opportunities. He did miss a couple free throws again, 1 of 3 at the line. 15 and 15, 1 assist, 1 block, 1 turnover in 25 minutes, but a good overall performance from Rudy. I'm also going to give a stud to Naz Reid in this one. He's going to be my, man, I almost want to go 4. I'm going to go 4 today. Why not? Friday's game was such a disappointment. I didn't do a full post-game pod. So we'll go 4 studs today. Naz Reid gets one, 14 and 3 in just 13 minutes. He played the entire fourth quarter, shot 5 of 7 from the field, 2 of 4 on threes, 2 of 4 at the line, 3 rebounds, 1 assist, and a block. He did pick up 4 fouls in just a quarter of play, but a solid performance from Naz. The Wolves needed this out of him. They need to be able to turn to him when the Rudy Cat thing either isn't working or there's foul trouble. Rudy and Cat both had 2 personals at halftime, but they didn't pick up any additional in the third quarter. So that wasn't really the reason. It was just a change of pace type thing, going small to match the Thunder and giving Rudy and Cat a blow. I think Finch's thought was probably like, hey, maybe we strike gold and we extend this thing. Those guys can rest the rest of the game, which is actually what happened. Or we can tread water with this lineup, allow Rudy and Cat to rest, and then come back with both of them midway through the quarter. They didn't have to do that. And a big part of that was because Naz played so well. Smart playmaking, as I said earlier in the show, he did a good job picking his spots to shoot, to be aggressive, to pass. Just a good performance from Naz. I also have to give Taurean Prince a stud for this one too. 11 points, 4 of 8 shooting, 3 of 5 outside the arc, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists in this game. He was a plus 18, which was the third best individual plus minus on the team, behind Jordan McLaughlin, by the way, and also behind Anthony Edwards, plus 22. A strong all-around game from Taurean once again. He was relatively aggressive in his 23 minutes. Again, a big part of that bench unit that played so well early in the fourth quarter. Well, really throughout the first, 3 quarters of the fourth quarter, that pushed that lead to 20. Taurean just has been so good so far this year. Such a big part of this Wolves rotation. Not a stud or a dud, but Jordan McLaughlin, I mentioned his plus 23, which led the team. He scored no points, but he had 4 assists and no turnovers. So a solid performance from Jordan McLaughlin, to be sure. The only dud for me in this one, the only dud for me really is Bryn Forbes. He's been, after being just an absolute flamethrower in the preseason and just seemingly never missing threes, which is an exaggeration, but that's what it felt like. Bryn Forbes had no points on 0 of 3 shooting, missed his only 2 3-point attempts, and the Wolves dodged several bullets there with him because he just wasn't playing well on either end. He's never really a great defender, but he struggled on that side early in the fourth. He was on the floor, part of that lineup. Well, I should say, not start of the fourth quarter, mid fourth quarter. He came in mid fourth quarter and was part of the lineup down the stretch. They gave up a ton of points in a hurry. They gave up like 12 points in the final 2 minutes of the game. But Forbes has to come around if he's going to be part of this rotation. Austin Rivers was the only player dressed that did not play for the Wolves in this game, interestingly. And then I'd also mention D'Angelo Russell. I'm not going to give him a dud because I thought he played fine. Just a really quiet game. 6 points, 6 assists, and 3 rebounds, only 5 shot attempts. And I believe all 6 of his points were in the first half. And I think 4 of the 6. He hit a couple of buckets early. And just a really quiet night for D'Lo. But at any rate, the Wolves take on the Spurs Monday night. And hopefully, who knows if Kyle Anderson's able to play or not. But if the Wolves play like they did against the Thunder and make just a few more threes, they should be in decent shape against San Antonio. Although, like I mentioned earlier, San Antonio has been pretty surprising so far this season with, I think frisky is the word I use. That's probably how I describe the Spurs at this point. Nobody really expected San Antonio to do much. I mean, it's a kind of it's not a very exciting roster outside of Keldon Johnson, pretty much. They lost to Charlotte by 27 in their first game, but they beat the Pacers on Friday, I think in overtime. And then they beat the Sixers, who are, started the season 0-3, but beat the Sixers on Saturday. So the Spurs are 2-1. The Wolves are 2-1. That happens Monday night. A quick note, you'll notice I did not do the live postcast with Marnie Gellner following the game Sunday. We've obviously had some technical difficulties if you listen to those with our connection with Marnie audio-wise. So we're working on that. The plan is to return to the live postcast Monday night following the Spurs game if we can get those issues solved during the day Monday. If we can't, I'll put that out on Twitter, and we'll still do the post-game pod like this, which we'll post late Monday, early Tuesday. That'll be Tuesday's show. But the plan is to do the live show with Marnie, which of course is live on the Locked On Sports Minnesota YouTube channel right when we do it, 45 minutes after the game when she's done with the Bally post-game. And then also at post, the audio will post on the feed here at Locked On Wolves, wherever you listen to the podcast. It just won't be on the Locked On Wolves YouTube channel. It'll be on the Locked On Sports Minnesota YouTube channel. So be sure to subscribe to that channel, check out the postcast, and hopefully we'll get that running after the game on Monday. All right. That's all I have for you today here on the show. Thanks again for making Locked On Wolves your first listen. It's greatly appreciated. Of course, it's free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken. You can download the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku or Amazon Fire TV and listen to all your favorite Locked On Sports Minnesota podcasts. Again, Roku or Amazon Fire TV. It's just a dedicated app to Locked On Sports Minnesota, so be sure to check that out. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. The Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. And for your next listen, be sure to check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.